Hi there. Welcome to the Graphic Possibilities 50 States of Comics tutorial workflow video. I'm Kate Topham. I'm the Digital Humanities Archivist at Michigan State University, and I'm kind of the Wikidata coordinator, engineer, champion for Graphic Possibilities. In this video, I'm going to give you everything that you need to know to participate in our 50 States of Comics events. For the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to assume that you know some basics of Wikidata, such as items, statements, properties, and references. So if you don't know what those are, I'm going to put some links in the description to some Wikidata tutorials that'll give you that info. So please do seek that out and meet me back here when you're done. So to give you kind of an overview of what we're going to do, I'm going to give you an introduction to kind of how we got the data and what our goals for these events are. Then I'll show you how to kind of get from catalog data to Wikidata. Then I'll show you our data spreadsheet and take you through it so you know what all of the information means. And then finally, I'll tell you what our workflow is. So I'll do an overview, walk through a couple of examples, and show you how to use Cradle, which is an open source tool that makes it really easy to create Wikidata items. So the overarching goal of this event is to add as many comics as we possibly can into Wikidata. And for that, we are using data from the MSU Library's comic art collection, which I have to tell you is the largest publicly accessible collection of comics in the US, in the world, possibly the universe. So we're using this Comics as Data North America data set, which is available online for download if you want to check it out. It comes out of the Comics as Data North America project, took all of our MARC records of comics published in the US, cleaned them up, turned them into a nice spreadsheet, reconciled some of the fields against Wikidata, and now we're going through state by state to start adding all of these comics into Wikidata so we get more representation in there. So how do we go from catalog records to Wikidata items? So first, I want to kind of talk about how we know we're allowed to make Wikidata items out of this at all, which can kind of be a hard thing to think about. One of the very cool things, but also the kind of tricky things about Wikidata is knowing that we're supposed to be able to model anything pretty much. And that can kind of get complicated. Like, okay, is this notable enough? Does this deserve to be in Wikidata? Because we can't put everything in there. So Wikidata has these notability requirements. So either for something to have a Wikidata item, it needs a site link to another wiki page. So like Wikipedia, Wikibooks, Wikicommons, etc. Two, if it refers to an instance of a clearly identifiable conceptual or material entity that can be described using serious and publicly accessible references. Or three, if it fills some kind of structural need. So if it's needed to make statements in other items more useful. So that's kind of where we get subclasses and things like that. To kind of make the network of Wikidata work. So we're in criteria 2. Everything we're putting into Wikidata is going to be some kind of material entity. It's going to be a book. It's going to be a comic book. It's going to be a comic strip. It could be another kind of book. We'll get to that later. They're all, and all of these are clearly identifiable. They're all material entities, and they can be described by sources and references, such as the MSU catalog. However, beyond the notability requirements, comics can kind of be a tricky thing to model in Wikidata. So first I'll kind of talk about like the particular problems that comics present. So And a lot of the things in our collection might be like one-off publications, like graphic novels, or like an anthology of comic strips that are published in one volume. Those are pretty straightforward. It's, it is a book. It's got an author, it's got a publisher, etc. It's one thing. But comic books and comic strips can kind of be a little bit trickier. So in comic books, those are usually or often published as series with individual issues. So we'll have in our catalog record, we might have a bunch of issues of the same series. This can also be complicated because there can be series can have like crossover issues. As you can see here, we've got like series A and series B have a crossover issue here and then go back to their own thing. So it can be kind of tricky to get your head around, okay, what series is this thing part of? But Wikidata allows us to make those relationships known. It's just important to kind of tease them out and make sure they're accurate. There can also be other issues where two series might have the same name, but they're done by a different author. Maybe they're focusing on the same character, or they're doing a revamp. So it's really important to kind of do some background research and make sure that you know exactly what thing you're dealing with. So when you start working with a catalog record, I want you to think about these two questions first. Number one, what kind of thing is this? You just want to figure out what kind of thing you're working with, because that's what you're going to put in the value for the statement instance of. So you'll make your item, and then you'll make the statement, this item is an instance of what? So for our collection, that could be comic book, it could be comic strip, it could be graphic novel. We do have a few nonfiction books about comics, so those should be like nonfiction book or something like that. There's not too many of those, so you won't have to worry about it too much, but I do want to mention it. And then second question, what relationship does this have to other items? So is this an issue that belongs to a series? Is this an anthology publication of a comic strip, for example? Or maybe it's a graphic novelization of a literary work. Those are important things to know when you're creating an item, because you want to make sure that it links to those other things to clarify exactly what kind of thing this is and get that information into Wikidata. So now I'll kind of take you through some examples of catalog records. So first up, we have Buck Rogers in the 25th century. This is the title up here. Then we have a slash, and then we have Dick Calkins. Yeah, that's how to pronounce his name. So we have the title, we have the author, and then some metadata down here. What format it is, the language, where it was published, the publisher, and the publisher date. Those are kind of the key in pieces of information that might help you differentiate one thing from another. And then down here under the description tab, this is some really important information for letting you know what kind of thing it is. So we see item description, title from cover, reprints the 1929 daily strips, 199 to 310. So based off of this info, we can see, okay, this is a book and it reprints the daily strips. So we can intuit from those pieces of information that we've got an anthology book of a comic strip. So this is going to be an instance of comics. Since this doesn't really fit as a comic book, as that's more specific, we're just going to call this comics and leave it at that. And we will probably want to link this to the Buck Rogers comic strip in some way. So we'll have to look up the item for Buck Rogers and figure out how to map that in Wikidata. But this is a comics. Second example, we have Helena Catfight, no author listed. This is our title. You can see under format, it says journal, which might feel super weird for a comic. But if you see that, just like a little red flag should go up in your head, like, okay, journal probably means that this is in some kind of a series. We're talking like academic journal more than like a personal journal. So this is it's a part of a series is what might be indicated by journal up here. Now down in the description, we can see published number 1, October 1995. So that lets us know this is a comic book that's part of a series. So we're going to make this this item for Helena Catfight as an instance of comic book, and that's the QID. You don't have to memorize that. You can look it up every time. So you always want to check the description to see if you get this kind of this issue number, and that lets you know it's definitely a comic book. Finally, comic strips can kind of be a little bit of a complicated case. So here we have a record for Mary Worth, and it says Sunday tear sheets in square brackets. This is another like red flag. This lets you know this should let you know that something's up. What Sunday tear sheets typically means is that somebody had a bunch of newspapers, had all the comic sections, and then cut out the individual strips for a certain comic strip and put them together in like a binder or a scrapbook or something. They're like literally cut out from the newspaper. And we can see in the description, it says clipped Sunday strips from July 6th, 1969 to June 14th, 1970. So since this says strips and it says Sunday tear sheets up here, that lets us know, okay, Mary Worth is a comic strip. So we should be looking for a comic strip. Very important though, in creating items for comic strips, you're not going to, you're making an item for the strip, the whole strip, not just this item, because it's not helpful in Wikidata to have this item separate from the strip. There's not any information that would be in an item for this like tear sheets item that wouldn't be in the item for that represents the whole strip. So when you encounter a comic strip, you want to make sure you're copying just the first half of this title, not the colon and not the Sunday tear sheets part of it, because you want to make an item for the comic strip as a whole. Another important thing to note about comic strips is that they have publication dates listed in the items for these like Sunday tear sheets items, but the publication dates indicate when those individual strips were published and not the existence of a particular strip. So if you're making a comic strip item for Mary Worth, don't use this publication date that's listed in this record because it's just for those Sunday strips, not for the entire strip. It's just for the ones that are clipped here. So you'll want to do a little bit of outside research, looking into Mary Worth and seeing what the actual publication dates are for this strip, not just for these Sunday tear sheets. I wanted to do a quick note on kind of adaptation, since that's important for knowing what kind of relationships things have. I couldn't find a comic quickly that would fit the bill, so we're going to use Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So here we have the item for the literary work, that is Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, the work by Mary Shelley. Now there's a whole bunch of, if you know Frankenstein, you know that it was published first in 1818 and then a revised edition in 1831. So we will see this is on the item for the literary work. There's a statement, has edition or translation. We've got 2 French ones. This is cropped since there's multiple. There's a lot. So we have 2 French translations. And then we have, again, Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus down here, publication date 1831. And if we click on this, we get to this item for the revised edition of Frankenstein, the literary work by Mary Shelley. So this is how Wikidata models multiple versions of the same work or the same text. Now, where this applies to comics is if we have a graphic novel, a graphic novelization of a literary work, you'll want to use this edition or translation of to link it back to the original work that it's based on. There's also a property called derived from that can be used to show relationships that aren't necessarily addition or translation. So that one's a little bit looser. All right, so that was probably a lot of information, but I want to bring us back to our two key questions. I gave you a lot of kind of options and red flags to look for, but essentially what you want to do when you're presented with a catalog record is say, okay, what kind of thing is it? And what relationship does it have to other items? And from there, you can start figuring out how to link different Wikidata items together, what you're going to put in the instance of statement, that kind of thing. But before we move on, I also want to acknowledge that that was a lot of information and it's very easy to get overwhelmed. So I want to especially invite you, if you're coming to the event, to raise questions. Especially if you're new to this, you can feel very nervous about, oh, I don't want to mess anything up. So you're always, what we like about these events is that we can bring together a community and start developing these best practices. A lot of those best practices for comics and Wikidata just haven't been defined yet. So there's not always a right answer, and that's totally okay. So raise issues, discuss with your fellow participants, leave discussion questions on items or on people's user talk page. That's what Wikidata is all about. We're trying to do our best. And of course, as you're going through, if you get super in the weeds, remember to take breaks. Please do take breaks. That's really important to make sure you don't get overwhelmed and frustrated with Wikidata. All right, so now I'm going to take you through the data spreadsheet where you will see where all the workflow magic happens. So you can access our data. It's a Google Sheet at bit.ly/GPRW50IL. That's all caps. So I'll go over to my tab over here. So this is our Google Sheet. Each of these white lines represents an item in the MSU Libraries Comic Art Collection. The orange lines are just there to break it up to make it easier to read. So most of these columns have information that you're going to put into Wikidata to create your item, but a few of them are special. So I'm going to show them to you now. So column A is the sign up column. So you'll put your name, your initials, whatever, into this column to claim it and say, I'm working on this. This one's mine. Back off. Column B that says QID. This is where you're going to put the QID for either the item you create, or if you find the item already created in Wikidata, you will put it here in column B. That is the last step of our workflow. So that kind of indicates, okay, I've finished this one, it's done. The last workflow column is column E. It is the link to the catalog record. So one of the first things you will do in the workflow is open this up to get to the catalog record of the comic you signed up for. So here we have Mary Worth, our friend from the last section, the comic strip. Columns C and D are a little bit special. Column C is going to play two roles. Role number one is it's going to be the label of your item. So here's the Wikidata item for Buck Rogers, the 25th century AD, which I showed you earlier. So this is the label. It's the title of this comic book. And we also have the statement, P 1476 title. So this info gets put into two places. As I mentioned, you'll probably want to edit this just to make it look a little nicer. For this, you'd probably want to delete the colon in the Sunday tear sheets. You might want to change this, like the spacing around this colon, just to make it look nicer. One thing I'll note also with titles with colons, when you make the title statement, you'll want to put everything before the colon into title and everything after it into subtitle. So there will be two statements there. But all of this, the whole thing, Waxing Nostalgic, a Gilthorpe collection, should all go into the label. Column D has the description. So every item on Wikidata has a label and it has a description. So you'll want to edit this a little bit since these were created automatically. It might not necessarily be correct and it doesn't have all of the information. So it was created in OpenRefine saying comic by author, published by publisher, in year. And so that might not be the most interesting description. It might not be the most useful or the most accurate. Since we have some comic books, we have some comic strips, we want to make sure that it's accurate. So you will want to edit those as needed. Now I'll go down over here to the rest of these columns correspond to properties in Wikidata. So you're going to use these properties to make the statements. So all of them have the property number P with a bunch of digits after that, and then an underscore, and then what that property essentially is. That way we can work both in Cradle and in Wikidata pretty easily. So when you are entering data into Cradle or into Wikidata directly, you'll copy the value here in the cell and put it into a statement that corresponds with this property number. So this is property 9555 is the MSU catalog number. That's the property for that. So you'll create a statement that says on your item, MSU Comic Art Collection catalog number, and you'll copy this value into it. And that goes for all of these that have a P number, a property number in the column header. Some of these properties want you to add want you to have another Wikidata item as the value. This is how we get those links. Two of those kinds of properties are P50 author and P123 publisher. So these want you to put in a QID so you can link them together. So if you're doing Mary Worth up here, you'll want to in your P50 author statement copy and paste this QID here, which corresponds to Ken Ernst. For publisher, you'll copy and paste this QID here that corresponds to Field Enterprises. However, not all of our authors and publishers are in Wikidata. So if you encounter if you encounter one item that doesn't have a QID in column I here, or if you don't, or if there's not one listed in publisher, what you want to do is search Wikidata for the author or the publisher and see if you can find them, because they might just not have been linked when we did the original reconciling. So you just want to search, and if you find them, great. You can put their QID into the P50 author statement. However, if you do not find them, you kind of have two options. Option one is score brownie points by creating the item for the author or the publisher that is missing. Option two is to just ignore it and move on. And if the statement you're working on is author and you can't find the author, you can copy and paste the value in column H into P2903, which is author name string. That basically allows you to enter the author information without having to create a new item. And it also allows for that kind of variance where sometimes people use a slightly different name, like a pseudonym, or if their name in the Library of Congress authority record is Kenneth, but they publish all their comics under Ken. We might have under P50, they might be in Wikidata as Kenneth, but we might want to show in Wikidata that they listed their name as Ken in this comic, for example. So that should cover everything in our data sheet. As always, you're welcome to ask questions. Hopefully it's relatively straightforward what everything means, but I think then we can move on to our workflow. Okay, so workflow. In this section, I'm going to let you know what tabs you need to have open for this workflow. Then I'll give kind of an overview, bird's eye view of what the workflow is like. And then I will go through the workflow process step by step with a couple of examples so that hopefully you can understand it pretty well. So 3 tabs that you'll need open throughout the entire workflow. One is our lovely data set with its bit.ly that I introduced in the last section. 2, you will need Wikidata open, and you'll need to be logged in, of course. So check up here, make sure you're logged in. And then 3, if you're going to use Cradle, you will need Cradle. Cradle looks like this. This is one example. This is the comic edition Cradle that we'll be using in this tutorial. Cradle is an open source tool made by Magnus Manska that basically allows users to create a form that you fill out to create a Wikidata item. You can designate certain fields as required. So you can see we have labels here is required. Instance of is also required. And we have a whole bunch. And once we fill out all the required things, there will be a create item button down here that we can create, and it will push to Wikidata. Importantly, in Cradle, you will need to be logged in order to make any changes. You'll also have to give Cradle permission to basically use your Wiki account, but it's all above board. They're not going to do anything weird with your Wikidata account. I'll just show you quickly what the homepage of Cradle looks like. So here are all the different forms, different Cradles that folks have put together, and ours is right here. It's Comic Edition. It's called Comic Edition because we're basically working at the edition level. In library science terms, we're dealing with something that has been published as an edition more times than not. Okay, so now that you've got your tabs all set, here's kind of the simplified view of the workflow. So first you're going to choose your comic. So remember I said you'll sign up in column A, put whatever indicator, stake your claim. Then step 2, what kind of thing is this? So for this step, on your row in the spreadsheet, you'll click this link, open up the catalog record, and determine what kind of thing you're dealing with. If it needs to be, if it's something that needs its own item, if it needs to be linked to something else, or if you just need to make like the item for the overall comic strip, not for a tear sheets item, for example. Step 3, is it on Wikidata? So once you've determined what kind of thing you've got, you're going to copy the title and search for it in Wikidata, because we want to make sure before creating any new items that we aren't creating any, we don't want to make any duplicates because that's a waste of Wikidata's bandwidth. Then once you've determined whether or not it's on Wikidata, you'll go to step 4, which is create data in Wikidata. So this could look like adding data to an existing item if it already exists in Wikidata. This could look like creating an item by filling out the cradle, or this could be creating an item from scratch and then adding statements from the spreadsheet, putting it into Wikidata. Finally, last major step is to add references. This will be pretty easy, but a little bit repetitive. I'll go through it a little bit more later. And then finally, once you've done all of these steps, you will put the QID of the item that you just created or the item that you just worked on into column B to indicate that you're done. And you start all the way back at choose your comic, and you choose another comic, and the cycle repeats. I also created a little workflow decision tree kind of thing to helpfully like visualize the decisions or what to do depending on what situation you have. So I'll go through it one more time in this like more detailed image. So step 1, choose your comic. Or really step 0, I guess, since the way that I've marked these. But step 1, what kind of thing is it? What are we doing with it? Step 2, checking if it's on Wikidata. If you find it on Wikidata, you will add statements from the spreadsheet to that item, add references to it, and then put your QID into the spreadsheet, and you are done. If you find that it is not on Wikidata, so is it on Wikidata? No, you'll decide whether or not to use Cradle. If you are using Cradle, you'll go to the Comic Edition Cradle, fill it out, and click the Create Item button that will appear when you have put in the 2 required fields. Then you will need to add references. Unfortunately, Cradle does not allow us to add references within the tool itself. So you'll need to either, when Cradle is done loading, I think it will link to your final item. If it doesn't, you can go to your contributions list that's up in the corner here and find the item and add. We'll say I was working on Buck Rogers, and you can add references here. I'll go through that a little bit more later, though. And then add that QID, and you're done. If you decide not to use Cradle, then you will create a new item from scratch. So you go here on Wikidata to create a new item. You'll fill out the label, you'll fill out the description, any aliases, we aren't really dealing with that though, and click create. You'll end up with a blank item, and you'll go through, you'll need to add instance of, since that is pretty much, that's going to be necessary for anything we're adding to Wikidata for these events. And then you can go down the line adding these statements manually. That's your add statements from spreadsheet. Add your references, and then add the QID to the spreadsheet. So that's kind of the different paths you can take through this workflow. Of course, you know, if something else works a little bit better for you, you're welcome to do that. However, I do very much recommend that you always check if something is on Wikidata or not, because duplicated items are no fun. Then somebody has to come by and merge all your duplicates, and nobody wants to do that. So please make sure things are on Wikidata before you make a new item. Okay. So now I'm going to go through a couple examples. I'm going to pretend I'm going to sign up for this very first comic here with my wiki username. And we can see it's Mary Worth. Welcome back, Mary Worth, friend of the tutorial. And I see, okay, it's Sunday Tear Sheets, probably a comic strip. And I'll open the link to the catalog record and see, yep, Tear Sheets. Here's, we've got an author string. We have 2 authors listed here, and a main author and other authors. That's something to keep in mind for later publications. It says journal. Then we want to go to the description tab to get more info on what this is. Clipped Sunday strips. Okay, this is a comic strip. So now what I'm going to do, I've chosen a comic and I've determined what kind of thing it is. Now I'm going to look for it on Wikidata. So I'm going to copy the title, excluding the Sunday Tear Sheets part, since that's not really part of the title, and go to Wikidata to search. Now, unsurprisingly, there's quite a few results, since Mary Worth could be a person's name. We can see, all right, look, there's an American comic strip by the name of Mary Worth. Is this us? It looks like it could be. So, all right, we've got a comic strip. We've got even an image showing that it is a comic, as we would think about it. Inception 1938. Okay, that's a little early for what it says in our little catalog record here, but that's fine. We've got Alan Saunders and Ken Ernst, who are listed here as our authors. So it's looking like we've got, and it has the publisher, the same publisher. So looks like we have found our comic strip. But just to do our due diligence, we're going to see what this other Mary Worth is in the search results. This Mary Worth is a person, instance of human. That is not what we are looking for. So having done our due diligence, all right, we have Mary Worth, the comic strip. So now that we've determined that it is on Wikidata, we are going to add statements from the spreadsheet to see if there's any missing info. Let's double check if language of work or name is on here. Yes, it is. And basically what I would do is go through each of these and make sure they are all listed in the item. And let's say I've done that, since I think this was made by one of our folks, so we know that it is, we know that all the info is the same. And so now we've finished adding statements from the spreadsheet. Now we need to add references. So I know that our Alan Saunders and Ken Ernst are listed as authors here in our catalog. So we can add a reference for that, saying that it was stated in. So references, you add a property and then you have a value. So our property is stated in, and it's stated in the Michigan State University Comic Art Collection. It is kind of long of a name, so sorry about that, but you can just type that in and that's our reference. So you can click publish, and there's our wonderful reference. I'm going to show you really quick a great tool that will help you do this a little bit faster. So it's called a gadget. So you go to your preferences for your account. Gadgets kind of allow you to do, it adds more functionality to what you can do in Wikidata. So there's one for merging for those pesky duplicate items. But what we are looking for is duplicate references, or maybe it's duplicate references. I'm not sure which, but we check it. Basically allows you to copy and paste references to multiple statements in the same item. So we can go save, and that's all set up. I'm going to go back to our Mary Worth, go back to our Ken Ernst, and open that reference, and we can copy it. And since I know Field Enterprises is also listed in the catalog, we can say insert reference, saving. There we go. And so we can go through and basically put all of this in, put all these references in. Now, and we'll say that we've done that so you don't have to see me click a whole bunch of times. Now we're going to copy this QID and pop it into column B, because we have finished. We have finished Mary Worth. Huzzah. So that's one example of going through the workflow when finding something that is already on Wikidata to the end. So now I'm going to show you one that is not on Wikidata, and we're going to scroll down a little bit because I want a specific comic for this. All right. So I've signed up for line 280 in the spreadsheet. Signed up in column A, choose your comic. Next step, what kind of thing is this? Look at the label. This is the Merry Pranks of Foxy Grandpa. We have several Foxy Grandpa comics in our collection. So what kind of thing is this? We want to open the catalog record, let it load. Here we go. All right, The Merry Pranks of Foxy Grandpa by Bunny. Bunny is a pseudonym. We can see there's a there's an authority record for Bunny that we might want to explore to see if we can figure out what their actual given name was. This is a book, English, published in Chicago. And then under description, we don't have much more to go off. It just says cover title. That just means they took the title from the cover image, I believe. So we can intuit, okay, this is a book. It's only 24 pages. It might be a comic book, but we'll probably do instance of comics for this one just to be safe. That'll still accomplish our goals, and that makes sense. So now we've determined that it's a book. It might be a comic book. It's probably just comics. Now we're going to look for it on Wikidata. So we copy The Merry Pranks of Foxy Grandpa. Go to Wikidata, search. And we get no results. So that probably means that we're all good to move forward to making a new item. But just to do our due diligence, we're going to look for just Foxy Grandpa to see what else is there. Like, is there anything on Wikidata that we might want to link to? So we've got a comic strip and we've got a film. I'm going to guess the film is based on the comic strip, but we'll look at Foxy Grandpa, the comic strip. Now we can, from the record, this is a book. It's called The Merry Pranks of Foxy Grandpa. It's probably different than the comic strip. It might be an anthology of Foxy Grandpa strips that were published in a newspaper. We can see down here that there's Carl E. Schultz is listed as the author, which is interesting because in our record, it's Bunny, as you will recall, is the author of our Merry Pranks. So we'll investigate Carl. He's a cartoonist, and lo and behold, he has an alias Bunny. So this looks like our guy. Excellent, excellent. Now we've done the what kind of thing is it? Is it on Wikidata? What kind of things are related to it? It is not on Wikidata, and so we are faced with our decision to cradle or not to cradle. And for the purposes of this tutorial, we are going to choose yes, cradle. So now we go to our cradle tab with Comic Edition open. Now, first things first, everything on Wikidata needs a label, and every label needs a language. 99% of the time, the language of the label will be English. So you want to put EN there. And then copy the title from column C, put it in there. Merry Pranks of Foxy Grandpa don't have any aliases. While I have the title copied, I'm going to put this into the title statement as well. Language EN, and add the text there. We don't have a subtitle, so we can skip that. Now, description. We have comic by Carl E. Schultz, published in 1905. That seems to be sufficient. We'll pop that into. Whoops, wrong field. Gotta pop that in here. One quirk I've noticed with Cradle is that it wants, it sometimes helps to put in the language before you type into the text box, because sometimes it decides that if you start typing here before doing the language, it decides that you didn't enter a language at all and says no. So we're going to say comic by Carl E. Schultz. But, I'm going to actually say bunny, since that's what it was. That's what it put in. That's what it says in our record. Instance of, we can pick from this little drop-down menu, or we can type. So for instance, you can put graphic novel in here if you think that better suits it. But for this, we're just going to pick comics. It's not an edition or translation of anything from. And now, okay, next we'll look at language of worker name. P407, language, catalog says English, makes sense. We can just search English. And we're going to select the West Germanic language. Author, we know, has a Wikidata item, but we'll double check. There is not an author listed here, but we know that he has a Wikidata item. So what I'm going to do very quickly is copy this QID and add it to the spreadsheet. You don't necessarily, we're going to do it like that, so it's not so huge. You don't have to do this necessarily, but it can be really helpful for your fellow participants, so they don't have to go searching for it. So that's his QID, and we can put that into the author field and click him. Since what we have in the record is Bunny and not Carl E. Schultz, I'm going to add Bunny to author name string. Now, what else do we have? 1905 is our publication date. So we will go down and find publication date, 1905. And it will autocorrect to year and Gregorian or Julian. You'll want to pick Gregorian, because we don't have any like way old comics. They just don't exist when before Gregorian times. If there are more specific dates, you can select you can make it more specific if you need to. Generally, this is going to be the year though. Then we've got publisher, M.A. Donahue & Co., which does have a QID. We'll go ahead and pop that into publisher. There we go, M.A. Donahue & Co. It's a Chicago bindery, which gives us a clue for column M, which is the publication location. We'll pop that into our Cradle. Chicago, what do you know? Click that. And the very last one is our MSU catalog number, which is column F. Copy 6. All right. When you're going through Cradle, one thing you'll want to do is just make sure that there's nothing that is red. Red means you've done something wrong. Everything is looking good though. And we'll just scroll through, make sure there's nothing else that we left off. Look through. There are a few extra columns in the data spreadsheet that include like the work ID, just in case something's based on something else. That's what column O is, and a few other things about like who's adapting it and if it's part of a series. Those are not in Cradle, so you don't have to worry about them if you're using Cradle. Most of the time they are going to be blank. It's just if they happen to exist. So we've got all of our info into Cradle. Cradle seems relatively happy, and we're going to click Create New Item. And it will say creating item, and you'll get a little spinning wheel of death. Sometimes you may get trapped in the spinning wheel of death for a little while and you won't be sure. Maybe you aren't sure if it has finished or not, and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to create my item, but it's not working. Sometimes Cradle will just show you this little spinning wheel of death for a long time, but it actually has gone in and created your item. So if it's been going for a little while, as it's happening with me, you want to go to your contributions list in Wikidata, and it will say, and it'll see here, you created the new item, the Merry Pranks of Foxy Grandpa. And we can see that my edits are there. So while Cradle is still, it still looks like it's loading, it has actually completed the task. Since this has been created, I'm going to hard refresh Cradle so that it is blank for me and ready for my next thing as it loads. While that's loading back up, I'm going to put in my references because we filled out the Cradle and clicked create, and now we are at the add references stage. So we're going to add reference here, stated in. I'm going to make a mental note to copy down this QID so I can make this happen faster. Art collection, I wish it would do that. Publish. We'll copy, insert these references down the line. See, and now you see the duplicate reference helps so much. Now we know. So there we go. We've got our Merry Pranks of Foxy Grandpa item all referenced up. And we're going to copy this QID, go back to our data spreadsheet, and paste that in to let everyone know that we are done. So now we've gone through the, is it on Wikidata? No. To Cradle, we did Cradle. And now we've added references and added a QID to our spreadsheet. So hopefully that was a helpful little introduction to Cradle. I won't go through the entire process of adding statements to an entirely new item, since hopefully with the Wikidata tutorials you've already completed or your Wikidata experience, you already know how to do that. But it's essentially a process of matching, finding the property, and then adding the statement and adding the references. It's all pretty much the same. So I will stop my share But thank you for watching this tutorial video. I hope it was helpful, and we are looking forward to your participation in our 50 States of Comics events. And if you want to hear more about our Wikidata stuff, you can find out at graphicpossibilities.hcommons.org. And I'll put that link in the description as well. So thanks so much, and happy wikiing.